A written book of glitter kind sits on my Kindle behind all the other things that I should be reading instead. But here we are, so let's all critique this text in this react. Yeah, yeah. Oh, oh.
Hey, hi, hello there, and welcome to another episode of An Anthropologist Reads Glitter and Lazer's book, A Life Full of Glitter. And you will notice the setup is a little bit different, and that's because we're in a different room completely. I didn't even think about the sound, but I think the sound's going to be okay. If you hear some humming in the background, it's probably the fans. It's like 80 going on 90 here, so... And my cats just threw their cat food dish onto the floor. Good on them. Anyway, we are on chapter 8. This is the loneliness chapter. And honestly, I think this is one of the more depressing chapters in the book. Only because it's about being lonely. And doesn't anybody like being lonely? Yeah, so this is chapter 8, loneliness, what to do when you feel alone. This is, she starts off with a quote from Albert Einstein, because Anna's a scientist, you guys. It is strange to be known so universally and yet to be so lonely. I bet Albert Einstein was lonely, honestly, just because, like, it's Albert Einstein. I know that a lot of, like, the savants from that that era complained of loneliness, mainly because they were, like, misunderstood, but they were also, like, celebs at the same time. I bet if you asked a lot of the celebrities today, they would probably tell you they feel kind of lonely because, like, they're so bombarded from all angles that they, like, probably don't feel like they can trust people, but that kind of a thing. So we start off with this story from Anna, and once again, it gives us a little bit more insight into Anna's history than I think Anna really expected it to. Keep in mind, as I say this could all just be made up. I'm not lying. This whole thing could really just be made up. You know? Um, so I guess just kind of take all of this with a grain of salt. I guess. I don't know. There's certain things in here, there's certain stories that she's told that I just kind of feel like she's making it up. Anna starts off telling us this story. She says, I was the child of two athlete siblings, which kind of says a lot, honestly, right there. My sister was a nationally ranked track star, and my brother was a former national champion wrestler. That's probably a lot of pressure. Now, she is the youngest, as I understand, of the children in the family, but I might be wrong. She might be the middle child, but I don't think she is based on this story, okay? Me, I was a fairly normal, unaccomplished 11-year-old, and as a result, was often forgotten. Now, we've heard stories throughout this book of more about her dad, and the reason for that is that her mother passed away when she was young. I don't know how young. She hasn't mentioned it in here. She did mention that her sister passed away, but this is clearly before that happened. But she's mentioned the highly competitive nature of her father, and she's clearly obviously picked up that competitive. Would it be competitiveness? Because she's not really competing against anyone. She's just like, well, she's like an A type. But anyway, not a compliment. That's not a compliment. Here she goes. We spent our weekends shuffling from one practice to another. Many of my childhood memories are of climbing mounds of rolled up, beat up, and discarded wrestling mats in gyms peppered throughout the Ohio Valley, and wandering strangers' schools' hallways on the weekends. Occasionally, there would be a few other straggler younger siblings to adventure with, but most of the time, it was just me. So, this kind of confirms what a lot of people have said, and that's Anna grew up lonely. She was clearly not the golden child, and that's kind of sad, honestly. And I don't know what her relationship with her siblings was like, but her relationship with her parents is clearly like, again, I don't really know what her relationship with her mother was like either, but she definitely had a contentious relationship with her dad. And she talks about that from a very early age, like all the way back at the beginning of this book. She tells us a story about how her dad was going to paddle her with a wooden spoon because she had gotten chocolate on the carpet. Bit of an overreaction, if you ask me, but we all have times in our lives where we feel like supporting actors in someone else's movies. It can feel pointless, boring, and worst of all, lonely. He says some of the most traumatic times in your life are not because you feel overwhelmed or devastated, but because you feel isolated, forgotten, and lonely. I don't know if traumatic's the word you want here. Y'all let me know. I I don't really feel like the act of being alone is traumatic. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this sentence, to be perfectly honest, but it sticks with me for some reason. So you guys let me know what you felt about that one. I know symptoms of trauma can be isolation. And part of the trauma response is feeling like no one can relate to you, even regardless if that's true or not. The feeling is the important part here. But I don't know. There's just something about that sentence that just doesn't hit right. But there you go. So in this little paragraph, we are told about Anna's very lonely and forgotten. I mean, forgotten's probably a good word here. Very lonely, forgotten childhood. She, like I said, she's obviously not the star of the family. I think that actually kind of explains a lot of Anna's behavior as an adult, but that's me personally. She continues on to tell about one particular. I'm going to skip one story. We'll come back to that because this story continues. She was talking about one time when she was at, I believe, one of her brother's wrestling meetings. She says, okay, hang on. So we're going to skip the next story and come back to it because she kind of continues this story of following her brother's wrestling career around with another story that feeds into this. And again, I don't know if this story is to be believed. This is the part of the earlier bit that I was like, I don't know if we should believe this part. But anyway, Anna says she was at one of her brother's wrestling matches. She was bored, lonely, and annoyed. She played with her shoelace and watched curiously as high school girls attempted to sell a saccharine sweet sucker to a 40-year-old man in in an embossed polo. She was struggling. This high school girl. Okay. First off, weird. Secondly, yeah, she'll get into mat mates here in a minute. I don't know how many of you know what mat mates are. You have to have like wrestling as part of your school curriculum, or it's not a curriculum. Anyway, one of the sports that your school plays, you would need to have wrestlers to have mat mates, but they're basically cheerleaders for wrestlers because, of course, you need that. Anyway, she says, I have no idea what possessed me to jump in and help, but the next thing I knew, I was standing beside this teenager. She's 11, by the way. Anna's 11 in the story. Helping her sell this man on the joys of a $2 lollipop. I wasn't just good at it. I was great. She says, you can use it as a top. You can hit your kid with it. When I look at a lollipop, my first thought isn't, wow, that would make a great implement to smack my child with. That thought does not go through my head. It never has. But you know, now that it's been put there, the next time I see a lollipop, I'm going to be like, that'll be a great blunt weapon. Anyway, that's just like, this is the thought process that goes through Anna's head. This is adult Anna writing this down. So whether this is something that 11-year-old Anna actually thought or not, this is what adult Anna decided to write. She says, I sold this sucker like it was some type of miracle product, certain to solve all of life's problems, cures, and ills, and somehow make you $100 in the process. Begrudgingly, the man caved. He had bought a sucker, and I had sold my way out of loneliness. And everyone clapped. I don't know what to do with this story. It's just such a weird story. I'm not saying something like this didn't happen. I'm just saying, like, it's a weird story. And it's just such a window. If it's a real story, it's such a window into Anna's mind as to how Anna views herself functioning in the greater world. She says, while I was barely in middle school, this is the continuation story of Anna the superseller here. My candy pushing abilities soon led them to adopt me into their fold. She's talking about mat maids, and she goes, "Don't even get me started about the name." Okay. What problem do you have with the term mat maids? They're using the term maid as in young woman. I don't understand, but whatever. I wasn't a mat maid in high school. I had friends who were mat maids who were also cheerleaders because there was like the seasons were different. So they'd go do mat maids and then they do cheerleading kind of a thing. I just I don't get the grudge here, but she also thinks cheerleading is beneath her. So she says, I learned from this experience that the hardest part of loneliness is that 90% of the time only you can make it better. She's not wrong. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily not going to feel lonely if you're in a group of people, especially a group of people you don't relate to. But I mean, like every other problem in your life, kind of like every problem in my life, the only person who can actually solve it is me. I have to take that first step. And a lot of times that first step is just reaching out for help. Anna, it's okay to reach out for help. I just want to let you know that because it sounds like no one ever told you that. And I'm just letting you know it's okay to get help. I am dead fucking serious about that. Anyway, so let's jump back to the story that I skipped over. This is one of those moments where Anna kind of tells us more than I think Anna is thinking that she's telling us about herself. And keep in mind as I go over this, Anna's 11 in this story. She's an 11-year-old, according to Anna in this story. She says, I remember being particularly distraught one evening, and so I started to brainstorm ideas to get attention. This is the 11-year-old Anna. She's at home. She wants attention. My first impulse was to throw a fit. This is 11-year-old Anna thinking the best way to get attention from her family was to throw a fit. There's nothing wrong with her. She says as much. She's just distraught for some reason, and so she wants attention. And the best way to do that is to throw a temper tantrum like a toddler at 11. Keep also in mind, this is adult Anna writing this antidote. This is adult Anna writing this story out for us to read. She says, I was 11. Give me a break. It seemed rational to my baby brain. 11 is not a baby in my book. It's not an adult. You're not a teenager either, but you left toddlerhood and babyhood like back before you were 10. You know, I know 6-year-olds. I don't know, maybe I'm bragging on my family, but I don't feel like it's that weird. My 6 and 7-year-old nephews were like incredibly logical. Like the concept of throwing a fit, maybe, but they would be doing it logically. I don't know. I just feel like 11's a little too old for this type of behavior. Am I nuts? Am I nuts? I don't feel like my family's that weird. That doesn't sound like that's honest to God. That kind of a story really does illustrate how isolated Anna was and how her family just, in order to deal with her, just like through whatever it was that she was having a temper tantrum at her. It's not a great way to grow up. It's a great way to basically just like ignore your kids. And I don't know. I just feel like it's a cry for help, especially if you're still doing it at 11. And it's a cry for help that her family completely ignored. That's my personal feeling on the thing, you know. This again, there's another one of these quick sentences. I don't necessarily disagree with it, but it does kind of tell us a lot about Anna. She starts off in the section, 3 types of loneliness. Loneliness is one of those emotions that creeps up on you. One day you're minding your own business, having a perfectly normal, active social life, and blammo, suddenly you feel alone. You can't tell me that isn't what happens to Anna, because we've seen multiple videos of her going on vacations where she goes. Actually, I've seen two videos now where she's gone on vacation with total strangers. One was the happiness retreat that was paid for, and the other one was her trip to, she was on a yacht trip somewhere, and she was with a bunch of total strangers. Again, this one was paid for. And so she didn't know any of the people she was with. And she complains in both of those videos about a sense of loneliness and about a sense of feeling outside of the overall group and how everyone else is clicking, but she's not clicking with the rest of the group. Understandable. And yeah, I can see how you would feel lonely there because when Anna starts these videos off, she's like, I am the star of the show. Everybody's been waiting for me to show up. And then halfway through the video, she's like, I'm so lonely. Everybody's left me. And it's like, you can see that it does it for her. This is like a switch. She's fine 1 minute and then suddenly she's lonely. I have not seen the most recent travel video that she's posted, but then there's also a video that I did watch where she's in Hawaii, and this is an older video, and she's taken a friend with her and she has John, her employee, with her. And there's a moment in that video where they're all climbing up this really tall mountain because Anna thought that was a good idea. And John and her friend get all the way up to the top, and Anna can't even get halfway up. And she starts to complain about how her friends have left her behind and shows she's starting to feel lonely because her friends left her behind. So Anna feels lonely even with when she's with people that she would qualify as being friends. This is weird. That's another one of those Anna cite your sources moments. And also keep in mind there is a notes section and there's no way to know what note goes where in the book. There's no footnotes. There's no way to connect the notes section to the chapters. It just exists. This is a really weird, it's just a weird way to cite someone. Dr. Julian Holt Lundstedt, a woman researching how loneliness affects our health. Why did that matter? There's nothing else in this paragraph that is dependent on her gender. So why was it important for you to put it in the sentence? Also, not to be stereotypical or anything, but Julianne is typically seen as a woman's name. Is there something about Dr. Julian Holt Lundstedt that we need to know and you were trying to communicate and did not do well? Why is that in there? That qualifier does not need to be there. And also, this hasn't happened at any other point. She's not listed every other researcher in here, a man, a woman. She hasn't said that at any other point. It's weird. It's very odd to have that in there. And again, it's one of those moments where I'm like, an editor probably would have been great for this. She goes on to tell us that loneliness is not the same as depression. I don't know how I feel about that one. That's another one of those I highlighted it because I'm like, I mean, loneliness is a sign of depression. It's a symptom of depression. I don't know a lot of people. I don't know if I've ever heard of somebody having loneliness and not depression. I've heard of people having depression but not loneliness, but not the other way around. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down below. Oh, and here we go. She finally gets it right. I even highlighted it in a different color. A 2012 study by Dr. Carla Crescentino at the University of California in San Francisco. It can be done. The only thing she didn't do is mention the name of the study, which she's given me enough information here that I could look that up. Now, if only there was a footnote connecting that sentence to whichever note it is in the notes section in the back. Then this would be perfect. So, I mean, I feel like giving her a silver star just for this. I literally highlighted it in a different color because I was like, holy shit, she actually got one. So, also another reason why I'm like, I feel like in the second half of this book, because it really is kind of happening around the halfway mark, I feel like the tone of the non-story parts has shifted, and I think someone else is writing for her in this aspect because the citations have gotten better. They're not great, but I mean, this one, they've gotten better. And just the overall tone of it has shifted until it comes to one of Anna's little stories. And then it's very clearly Anna talking. Like the language, even the literal sentence structure and the words that are being chosen are different. Anyway, she does talk a lot about loneliness. Loneliness sucks, you guys. I mean, I'm not trying to be dismissive. Loneliness sucks. And then we go back to this shit. Many doctors even consider it a chronic illness. Who? Where? What? When? Cite your sources. Put a footnote in here. This is not a citation. She goes on to describe some other symptoms of loneliness and like how loneliness how you can internalize loneliness and that kind of thing. I don't necessarily disagree with her, but it also the things that she writes down feel like she's describing depression, but she's insistent throughout this entire chapter that loneliness is not depression. Again, y'all let me know what you think down below. And since she doesn't actually connect any full-on studies to these claims, I can't really like argue or refute it because there's nothing to argue and or refute. It's just Anna saying things and claiming that there's research to back up the shit she's saying. Maybe there is. I don't know. She does also go through some lines here and there that, again, tell us more about how Anna thinks and how Anna feels more than how loneliness actually works. So she says, throughout my life, I would have odd moments where I would suddenly feel lonely without a clear specific cause. Maybe I'd see a post of a few distant Maybe I'd see a post of a few distant friends together and wonder why I hadn't been invited. Everybody has FOMO. And it sounds like, honestly, this sentence to me sounds like Anna never really trusted her friends. And she does say these are distant friends. I don't know. I kind of feel like she's putting a lot of pressure on her friends to include her as opposed to her doing things with her friends, like she planning the things. She also says, maybe I'd forget to plan anything on the weekend and then be too overwhelmed or scared to ask anyone to hang out. So, and I guess her point is that loneliness makes you isolate yourself. That's, I mean, understandable. But she does go, social media can be a huge trigger of these feelings for me, of FOMO. She says, FOMO means a lot more to a person with internal loneliness. It can trigger feelings of planned exclusion as if people are deliberately seeking to exclude you. The interesting thing about this sentence, or this little paragraph, is that this actually is something that has been studied, and she could have quoted some studies here. And these studies go back to the Instagram, when Instagram suddenly started becoming big. So it's something that's been studied for, I don't know, the better part of 2 decades at this point. But she doesn't. She's just telling us, literally just telling us how she feels. So Anna's only case study for loneliness here isn't the hundreds, of not thousands of people who feel lonely because of social media that have been studied. Granted, there are many more people that have FOMO. And apparently they're, one of the advertising tactics right now is to invoke FOMO in the younger generations to encourage them to buy products. Go figure. But again, all of this has actually been studied. There are actual studies that she could be quoting, but Anna just relies on herself. Now, this is 2018. There's still enough research in 2018 or 2017 that she could have quoted here. And no, I'm not going to do Anna's job for her, especially not 6 years after this book was published. Anyway, but it does sound like, that planned exclusion, as if people are deliberately seeking to exclude you. And couple that with seeing distant friends together and wondering why she hadn't been invited. I don't feel like the connections that Anna has, at least in 2018, were connections that she trusted. Does that make sense? Like, she's always suspicious of her friends and her social circle of excluding her, of not including her in the reindeer games. And I think that's very telling, especially looking at modern Anna. I think she had some friends with her when she went to Portugal. And that's one of the videos I watched where she couldn't find anything that fit her and then threw a fit about it. But like the happiness retreat, she didn't have any friends with her. The not the Virgin cruise that I know she's currently on or just wrapped up, but the Virgin Island tour that she had on the yacht. She didn't have any friends with her, and it looks like she could have had the option to bring a friend because a lot of the girls there did. So that could have been an option. I don't know. I'm just speculating there. When she went to Hawaii with a friend and John, and I guess I'm just trying to like remember all of the travel videos of hers that I have watched. She doesn't, and these are all modern videos. These aren't 6-year-old videos. She doesn't take a lot of friends with her. Even her Disney trips, she seems to go on them alone and then meet somebody there. Now, she did take a trip to London, a brief trip to London, and she met up with one of the guys that she had met when she was on the happiness retreat. So she did manage to make a connection, but a friend? I don't know. He was friendly and he was happy to show her around London, but I don't know. She just doesn't seem to have a lot of friend connections. And she doesn't talk about her friends either in like a passive way. Like I talk about my friends a lot. I mention them. I don't mention their names, but I mention that they exist. Even Amber does that. Even Amber's like, my friends, my friends. You know, my friend texted me. My friends came to visit. I went to go see my friends. Whether you believe it or not, that's how I would expect Anna to talk. I don't even hear Anna say any of that. Like, I don't even hear Anna trying to convince us that she has friends. It's very strange. And it's sad. I highlight a couple more spots where she almost gets citations correct. She calls back here to the Holt Lundstad and her colleagues. Since she's already mentioned Dr. Holt Lundstad before, you can do this after you've properly cited someone. You can do a callback like this later. It still would be good to have a footnote here, but at least you've already prior mentioned the researcher and their research. So you could fall back on that without too much confusion, I guess is my point. And then she almost gets it here. Louise Huckley, senior research scientist at the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago. Almost. You're missing the date. You're missing any link to their actual research. Also, we didn't mention that Louise is a woman. So why did we do that one time? It's still weird, and it's even more weird that you're not doing it every time. Though I feel like it would be really weird if you mentioned the researcher's gender every single time. That is not a normal part of citation. It's not necessary. So I'm just really curious why it was just that one time. I don't know, maybe there'll be another one later on in another chapter, but currently it's the first and only time I've seen it. And to be fair, it's pretty much the only time I've ever seen it in a professional paper. I've never seen that. I don't know, maybe it's a new trend, maybe we should do it. I don't know, but currently, as far as I understand, that's not a normal part of citation. But, you know, going back to this, what I was saying earlier, though, this is very. This is just another one of those, like, someone else is writing now. Someone else is citing these things. Someone else who has a better understanding of how this should work. The way these things are being cited in this chapter, it's as if they were expecting a footnote to be attached to them, and the footnote never got attached. And I'm kind of wondering a little if that's not what was intended, because those notes in the back are numbered 1 through 77, but there's no numbers throughout the actual text. So I wonder if there was supposed to be footnotes and it just never happened. And I do feel like that kind of falls back on Anna in the end, because putting the final format together before submitting it to the publisher it kind of feels like that would be your job, because the publisher's not going to know where your footnotes are supposed to go. You're the only one who knows that. Anyway, We go back to research has shown, and I think when we're flipping to this, when we get to these, I think that's Anna. I think that's Anna inserting bits and pieces into what was already written. And that's kind of how this is feeling. It feels like she was handed a manuscript and she went through and adjusted it to make it sound like it has more of her. I mean, obviously she's the one that has to put the stories in, but it sounds like the rest of it has been written by someone else and it was handed over to her. And as I said in the previous video, in chapter 7, it is perfectly acceptable to use a ghostwriter. That is not the issue here. Ghostwriting is a profession. People do it every day. It's fine. But it just, when you, I don't know, the tone shift is so drastic. And also, but that's basically just it. The tone shift is so drastic. And there's still chunks of this book that really could have used an editor. Just because you have a ghostwriter doesn't mean it was edited. Does that make sense? I guess is where I was going with that. Um, she says humans crave communities, and when you feel removed from one, you feel literally sick until you find your tribe. We are social animals. We're pack animals, and yeah, we do feel when you isolate any animal that's a social animal, they tend to degrade mentally until they can either get with a group or the inevitable happens. And I do think there's like a loneliness epidemic that's occurring worldwide, honestly, where we're mistaking these digital interactions that we're having as actual socialization. I try to be pretty upfront with my audience like this. This is not a real conversation. I enjoy that you're watching my video. Please don't click off. But at the same time, like, don't mistake this as actual social interaction. Does that make sense? She has this thing here. Prolonged loneliness can trigger what psychologists call a hypervigilance. Yeah, she does say that. Prolonged loneliness can trigger what psychologists call a hypervigilance for social threats. And it's not just loneliness that'll do that. But I have this highlighted in yellow, which means this is one of those locations where I really needed her to cite something here, some research or a researcher or anything. Not necessarily because I disagree, but because this is a fact statement that Anna does not have firsthand knowledge of, I guess. Anna is not a psychologist, so she needs to cite where she pulled this from, because otherwise it just sounds like she's BSing off the top of her head, because it's possible she was. But I mean, hypervigilance for a social threat is rather specific. And again, loneliness isn't the only thing that causes this, which is the other reason why I kind of need this cited, because I want to know the context of this. Like, I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying I know it can happen in other places. So I need this specific instance to be cited. Did that make sense? She says, have you ever felt alone and as a result began to notice all the ways you weren't included in your friends' lives? Again, going back to what I was saying earlier, this is another one of those moments where Anna's kind of demonstrating to me that she doesn't really have friends that she trusts to be friends, you know? And Anna is always looking at people outside to include her. She doesn't seem to be including people herself. Anna's not making plans and including people. Anna is waiting for other people to invite her to go do things. That's just how it sounds to me. You might even begin to think the worst of the relationships you do have, assuming people are choosing not to hang out with you. I mean, that pretty much sums up the argument I've been making. She talks about chronic loneliness and then says it's more common than depression. Again, that's something that I need her to cite. And the note I put here is that I don't think Anna knows what depression is, because just reading this and seeing Anna in the wild through her own videos, it's very evident that Anna has depression, at least to me. I'm not diagnosing her. All right. Do not run with that. To me, it seems very clear that that's what's going on. Reading through this book and hearing her talk in other videos that she's put out, it feels like Anna is very determined to not get classified as someone with depression. I'm not entirely sure why. I know there's a lot of stigma around being depressed or having a depression diagnosis. It's kind of a shame to me. I kind of find it irksome that that's still a prevalent view of depression even today, obviously. Um, and it really kind of, to me, shows in this book that Anna is desperate to not be classified as depressed. She will classify herself as anything else other than depressed. And it's just another one of those moments where I'm like, Anna, it's okay to go to a doctor. It's okay to go see a therapist. It will actually make things better. It will get worse. It will feel like it's getting worse, but it will actually be getting better. All right. It's just, on the off chance Anna's watching this. I highly doubt she is, though. I don't know if chronic loneliness is actually more prevalent than depression. There's no citation to any kind of statistic or study to back up that statement. So, again, I'm not doing Anna's job for her 6 years after the fact. I think it's been 6 years. And then how to feel less lonely. Anna's go-to Anna's go-to solution for any kind of like bad feeling or thing that you no longer want to be is literally, I force myself to send text messages to 5 different people whose relationship I value or I want to get known better. The important thing to take away from here is she just forces herself to not be lonely. If you just tell yourself you're not lonely, then suddenly you're not lonely. It's just that simple. Oh, I never thought about that. I should just walk around and tell myself that I'm not depressed, and suddenly I'm not depressed anymore. Ah, man, why didn't I ever think of that solution? It's just it's just like every single chapter in this book where she's talked about how to not be something. Her solution is just force yourself not to be. That's, I mean, I guess that's effectively what eventually has to happen, but maybe, I don't know. It's just so simplistic and so like, eh, you're not really lonely. You just need to tell yourself you're not lonely and you'll be fine. But I'm still lonely. Yeah. One thing I do is smile at strangers and stop to pet their dogs when I go for runs. I have this highlighted actually because of the whole running saga that happened this past year where Anna completely loses it over a woman telling her good job while she's out running. And here in this book in 2018 where she's like, "Oh no, I love talking to people while I go on runs." Huh. But anyway, it does kind of go back to Anna just forcing herself to not be lonely. I'm not going to lie, just smiling at strangers and stopping to pet their dogs, I don't really see how that's going to overcome chronic loneliness. These are not acquaintances. They're not even acquaintances. Unless it's a friend of yours who's walking their dog and you're like, "Oh, hey." And then you stop and talk to them. Or like my neighbors. My neighbors are constantly walking their dogs and I'm a very nosy person, so I go out and I'm like, "Oh, hey, you're walking the dog. Hey, let's sit and talk for a minute. I'm from the Midwest. Leave me alone." And since I'm from Philly now, or I'm acclimating to Philly, we also stand in the middle of the road in order to have these conversations because that's what you do in Philly. Long drawn out social conversations have to be done in the middle of the road. The more cars you're blocking, the better. I'm joking, but I'm not. Um, but as far as like just like a total stranger, like we've got a couple hiking paths out here that are pretty popular and people like to walk their dogs on them. I'm not saying that I haven't stopped and smiled at somebody or asked to pet their dog or whatever. I mean, I walk my cat, so a lot of people have questions, and that's understandable. But are those people don't make me not feel lonely because they're not friends. We're not acquaintances. We're just two people who have a moment on the walking path. So I don't know. I don't really feel like it is social interaction. That is true. But I don't know if that's really something that would combat chronic loneliness. I don't believe of the myriad of things that are wrong with me. I don't believe chronic loneliness is one of the issues. So if you are somebody who has that, let me know. Um, because I don't know. But also, there's no citation. I mean, but also, this just goes, it's just so contradictory to her behavior late last or early. It was either late last year or early this year with the whole meltdown she had over somebody telling her good job while she was running. I'm just like, sure, Jan. And then I highlight this only because the theme throughout this book with Anna is like in last chapter we were talking about, because it was about goal setting. Last chapter we were talking about how she dismisses any kind of social interaction as being lesser than a non-social goal. Like she was saying, you put off the goal of writing a paper in order to socialize with a friend, or you put off going to the gym in order to hang out with a friend. And the hanging out with the friends or socializing with the friends aspects were the negative choice to the positive choice of writing the paper or going to the gym. I'm not saying those things aren't important. I'm just saying human interaction should usually trump non-human interaction. Does that make sense? I went into it last chapter, so if you haven't watched that video. But she has also been very against social volunteering. She makes quipped remarks about people doing like charitable volunteering things like making sweaters for homeless people. And I forget what the other one was. Oh, something about feeding local dogs at the local dog shelter. But yet here she says, volunteering is another way, it's another great option to help us combat feelings of loneliness. But you've been so adamantly against volunteering and social interaction up to this sentence. It's just interesting. She also says, additionally, volunteering provides a concrete memory of where your hard work has made a difference in the world. So for her, I think the issue is for her, volunteering is not altruistic. You don't volunteer, in Anna's world, it seems like, to me, you don't volunteer because you want to make a difference or because you feel like you have a calling to do something, or it's, you benefit in some way or you enjoy the benefit that you give back in some way. Those are not the reasons to volunteer for Anna. The reason to volunteer for Anna is so that other people can see what you have achieved. So other people can see how you are a good person. It's about impressing others. It's not about actually doing the volunteering. And that just comes across time and time again in this book, where for Anna, it is more important to be perceived a certain way than it is to actually be that way. There is one of the chapters she's talking about, I forget what the exact topic was, but the sentence was something like, remember that friend who seems to have it all pulled together and how inspiring that person is to you. You should strive to be that person. Not because you should want to be that put together or that well adjusted in the world. You want other people to see you as being well adjusted and put together. Whether you are or not, the goal is to be perceived that way, not to actually be that way. And Anna just kind of goes back to that kind of stuff time and time again. It is more important to Anna to be perceived as a runner than it is to actually be running correctly or at all. It is more important to Anna to be seen as a fitness influencer than to actually be doing the exercises correctly or to not be doing exercises that could injure her in the long term. It is more important to Anna that people see her as a world traveler than it is to Anna to actually enjoy where she's going when she gets there, or to have a good time on the trip. It's perception dominates in Anna's world, and it's kind of like this here. It is more important to Anna that she be seen as not lonely than it is to actually not be lonely. For Anna, it doesn't matter if you are lonely. You just need to show everyone that you're not. And suddenly you won't be lonely. I'm pretty sure you're still lonely. If loneliness is an actual chronic illness, you're probably still lonely even if you're faking it. Like, ask anyone with a chronic illness. You learn to fake. I believe they call it masking, but still the point is. And then at the end of the chapter, we have her little box that we were missing in the last chapter, by the way. We have her little box on how to deal with loneliness. Avoid self-imposed isolation. Cool. Explore a new hobby or interest. Okay. Nurture existing relationships. Okay, cool. Volunteer in your community. Not a bad idea. Seek professional help and support. Anna, it is time to take your own advice. But anyway, so that is the end of chapter 8. There we go. Chapter 9, we will be going into body, loving the skin you're in, where I am sure I'm going to lose my crap because I'm almost positive it's going to be full of fat acceptance and haze BS because in this era, Anna is very much ingrained in that rhetoric, that concept, that philosophy, if we will. So I'm personally not looking forward to chapter 9, but if you want to watch me lose my shit, you should look forward to chapter 9. And a lot of people, for whatever reason, like seeing me get agitated. So, am I funny when I'm angry? Do I amuse you? But so to put an end to chapter 8, I don't know if loneliness is a chronic illness. Anna certainly didn't put a good argument forward for it because there's no citations that I can look back on and be like, oh, look at all this research. But I do believe that loneliness is an issue. It is a societal issue. I do think that loneliness can be really bad. I think it's more of a symptom of depression, but these are my personal opinions on the matter. So if you're somebody who has been diagnosed with it, you obviously have a different experience than I do. But regardless of what my perception of chronic loneliness is, I always say that at the end of every one of these chapters, it feels like if you can get help, go get help. It's okay to ask for help. If you feel like you can't, maybe do take some advice from Anna and maybe do reach out to 5 people who you have some kind of connection with, or even like the most distant of relationships with. See who gets back with you. Because if even one of them responds, I mean, that's one person that you can talk to. So I don't know. I hate to see people suffer when there are ways to get out of it, but I also completely understand feeling trapped and feeling like there's no way you can get help. So, like, I sympathize with that feeling. And I also just want people to know, in case you need to hear it, there are people who can help. And sometimes you just have to reach out for help first. But anyway, that's my PSA at the end of this chapter because it was kind of a depressing chapter. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about it. I guess I'll see everybody in chapter 9. I hope you guys are enjoying this. Go ahead and leave I don't know, what's a symbol of friendliness? Leave a symbol, leave an emoji that invokes friendship down in the comments section. Leave an emoji that invokes friendship down in the comments section. And if you're reading along, let me know what you think. If you're not, let me know what you think. And I will see everybody in chapter 9. Bye!
This is my outro music. You can't copyright strike me because it's just me singing. This is my outro music. Thank you for watching. See you next time.